Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our web-based training will review MACRA and MIPS as a high-level overview. This web-based training is presented by Tony Elholm, the Director of Coding and Compliance for RT Welcher and Associates. Our web-based training today will review MACRA, MIPS, and understanding the two designated tracks for MACRA, which are MIPS or APMs. We're also going to discuss the differences between MIPS and previous quality and cost programs such as PQRS, meaningful use, and value-based payment modifier. The other discussion that we're going to have is regarding the potential financial upside and or downside of MIPS participation. Whether you like it or not, MACRA and MIPS are here to stay. And unfortunately, ignoring them is guaranteed to negatively impact the financial well-being of your organization. It's more important than ever that the quality measures data you report have a positive impact on your reimbursement. Otherwise, Medicare reimbursement could be reduced up to 5% for the reporting year of 2018. There's only 6 months left in the year, so time is of the essence. We're also going to discuss next steps you can take within your practice to comply with MACRA and MIPS. The landscape of healthcare reimbursement is changing. The traditional fee-for-service, one-size-fits-all payment model will soon be a thing of the past. The future of reimbursement is going to rely heavily on diagnosis-driven data, the medical necessity of the encounter, and the emphasis on accuracy with correct code utilization is as important as it has ever been. With the emergence of ICD-10, clinical specificity as well as code specificity are more important than they ever have been. This information and data translates into MIPS reporting guidelines that we must follow and meet in order to avoid negative payment adjustment. Healthcare is an ever-changing industry. Every day, things change. The guidelines change, the rules change, including MACRA and MIPS. So it's really important that you stay abreast of those changes and identify what's most important for your organization as far as the changes that need to be implemented to comply with these new rules and regulations. Just to give you a little bit of background, MACRA replaces the historic SGR, the Sustainable Growth Rate Reimbursement Formula. So prior to 2015, every year, we would see this campaign with regards to the Doc 6 bill. And it was kind of always a very interesting time because we were sitting on the edge of our seats. Is the reimbursement going to go up? Is it going to go down? What's going to happen to the reimbursement formula? And so MACRA actually replaced the SGR formula so that providers can have a better understanding of what's ahead with regards to reimbursement, providers and organizations. MACRA is the pay-for-performance model. So we're shifting from the fee-for-service model to pay-for-performance, and MACRA is really the way that the government is pushing healthcare providers to do so. Practices and organizations across the country will either be incentivized or penalized via reimbursement outcomes based on your performance with quality care outcomes. So your financial incentive to understand these regulations is definitely there. If you're going to receive a 5% Medicare cut, that may not hit you substantially today, but in 3, 4, 5 years from now, that 5% will become 10%, 15%, and it's just going to keep growing. So it's really important that if you're not on board, you get on board and you have everybody within your practice on board so that you can be successful in the MACRA MIPS transition. QPP is an acronym that you'll hear quite a bit. It stands for Quality Payment Program, and basically this combines and replaces all of the value-based modifier, meaningful use, PQRS. It consolidates all of those and creates an opportunity to be paid more for doing what you do best, which is making patients safer and healthier. That's really what providers focus on. And Medicare is trying to align their goals with provider goals through QPP. The majority of the measures, at least from what I've been told, in the program are clinician initiated so that we're ensuring we are rewarding what matters most to clinicians and their patients. So the idea is that each of the measures and quality sets that have been designed came from clinicians and are approved by clinicians. Whether that's true or not, time will tell. MIPS stands for Merit-Based Incentive Payment System, and MIPS is essentially one of the tracks for MACRA. So a lot of times you'll hear people say MACRA when they're really talking about MIPS, and it can be really confusing, but MIPS is a track of MACRA as well as APMs, which are a track of MACRA. So Merit-Based Incentive Payment System is the largest track of MACRA. It's the track that the majority of organizations and physicians will follow for QPP. So this consolidates all of the alternative merit-based incentive programs that you've had exposure to up until this point, PQRS, value-based payment modifier, and meaningful use. Many of you may still be experiencing a incentive, a negative adjustment for PQRS, meaningful use, and value-based payment modifier. This will be the last year for that financial impact because MIPS will take over in 2019. So you should already have an idea of what that adjustment is going to look like starting on January 1st of 2019. MIPS provides bonus payments to participating providers of eligible APMs. So there's opportunity to get more in addition to the work that you're doing now under the fee-for-service model. So the two tracks for MACRA are MIPS and APMs. Again, MIPS will be the majority of providers and organizations will fall under this track. APMs, if you're not in an APM, it's possible that you should explore APM models, and we'll talk about some examples of those a little later on so that you have familiarity with what those are and if that's appropriate for your organization to explore further. The majority of practices, as I said, will be reporting under the MIPS program, and reimbursement will either be increased or decreased based on how well you perform with the quality metrics you are required to report. QPP, Quality Payment Program, seeks to tie Medicare closer to its goal of quality by 2019. So the goal is to take payments and tie them to your quality outcomes. And Medicare is very optimistic in that they want to do this by 2019. This is probably not realistic for at least another 5 years. So they've taken a lot of the requirements and lowered them because of the burdens and some of the pushback that they've gotten after the first submission year for MIPS, which closed out on December 31st of 2017. MIPS helps link fee-for-service payments to quality and value. So again, the shift of volume to value is really the overall goal of MACRA, and creating a new framework for rewarding providers for giving better care, not just more care. So the idea is, instead of packing as many patients into our schedule to receive reimbursement, how well are we performing on the quality measures and patient outcomes, and really that shift from volume to value from a reimbursement standpoint. So QPP year one started on January 1st of 2017. So how this works is your submission year for, your submission data for year one was January 1st, 2017 to December 31st of 2017. And the last day to report for 2017 was March 31st of 2018. So that date has come and gone. If you did not report for 2017, you will likely see a negative payment adjustment starting next year on January 1st. You should have gotten some kind of report with your feedback, and they are supposed to release most of the feedback in July. So definitely be on the lookout for that so that you know what to expect for 2019. But at the very least, you should have an idea of your submission and when it took place, if you met all of the criteria. And they made the criteria very, very minimal for the first year, so that if you did the bare minimum, you could at least get a neutral adjustment instead of a negative adjustment. So QPP year two started on January 1st of 2018. So we are now June 19th, 2018, so we're 6 months into the year, and we still have time left to collect our data for the second year of QPP. You have until December 31st of this year to collect data for QPP year two, and then I believe the submission deadline will be March 31st of 2019 for reporting year 2018. So you just want to get on the listservs and the updates so that you know exactly what the expectations are with regards to submission deadlines. QPP year three starts on January 1st of 2019. So next year, January 1st through December 31st will be our reporting year three for QPP. Now, the really confusing thing is that your year one reporting data will not impact your payments until 2019. So 2017 will impact 2019, 2018 will impact 2020, 2019 will impact 2021. So every year you will start to feel the financial ramifications of how well you did on the reporting. So if you do nothing, you can definitely expect a negative payment adjustment. If you do the bare minimum, it's possible that you will get a neutral payment adjustment. And then if you actually report lots of data and you do well on the measures, you could potentially see a positive adjustment. I think everyone's goal is to be on the positive side. So it's super important that you get ahead of this now before 5% becomes 10%, 12%, 15%. Because as I stated before, every year this is going to expand. The requirements are going to become more extensive. And so now is the time to really get on board with how this all works. So 2017 performance year, the submission deadline was 2018 March 31st. And then your feedback period, like I said, you should get something at the very latest July. And if you do not hear anything, I definitely recommend that you contact CMS to get your status with regards to MACRA MIPS. And then, as I said before, your performance year for 2017 will impact starting January 2019, so just about 6 months away. Who is exempt for 2018. So the exemption requirements for 2017 are different than 2018. So just keep that in mind. We're looking at QPP Year 2 exemption requirements. So clinicians or groups with less than or equal to 90,000 in Part B allowed charges, or clinicians or groups with less than or equal to 200 Part B Medicare beneficiaries. So this is an either or. If you have less than 200 Medicare patients, but you have more than 90,000 in allowed charges, you're exempt. It's either or, whichever is most applicable to you. If you do not meet the exemption requirements, then it's safe to say that you're required to participate. Providers that are new to Medicare in 2018, as in brand new, are not required to report in 2018. And this is exclusive to Medicare Part B, so this does not apply to Medicare Part A. This only applies to straight Medicare Part B. So you really want to look at your population and see if you're able to meet these exemption requirements, and if you are, you don't have to do anything because Medicare already knows that you're exempt based on their data. Other pertinent changes, so as I said, these rules have changed, they continue to change, so it's really important that you stay up to date on those changes. Some important notable changes include the MIPS cost performance category. So this did not exist in 2017. This has now been added as 10% of your total composite score. Cost category is going to continue to expand. So 10% in 2018, it's going to keep going up. And eventually, cost will be the deciding factor with regards to how well you do in all of this. Because at the end of the day, Medicare and all of the other insurance companies are doing their best to cut costs. And so the way that they can do that is by monitoring costs across the board and then penalizing those that are considered high-cost providers when comparing specialties and similarities with regards to providers and their peers. The performance threshold was increased to 15 points in year 2. It was only 3 points in year 1, which was the transition year, 2017. And they're going to continue a phased approach with regards to public reporting for QPP performance information. So that's going to be evolving. A positive or flat fee will be established annually, and there will be 2 tracks for determining fee updates thereafter. As I said, this is emerging, evolving, but right now, neutral adjustment, positive adjustment, depending on how much you report, or negative if you report nothing. So there are 4 criteria that will determine MIPS composite performance score, and those are quality, cost, promoting interoperability, and clinical improvement activities. So meaningful use, cost, quality, and advancing care initiatives. Quality will be the sum of 60 points or 60% of your MIPS composite score. The cost category only counting for 10% of the performance score. And again, we'll keep going up in subsequent years. And you'll be scored and compared to other providers based on specific cost measures that track your Medicare reimbursement. Promoting interoperability, so using your EHR to report measures can also streamline your efforts, but also communicate how well you're using your EMR. And then clinical improvement activities. So looking at measures for quality improvement activities and advancing care are really the most important steps to take in preventing negative payment adjustments. There are a lot of acronyms. With any of this stuff, there seems to be acronym overload. We call these MACRA. If you're part of facilitating this transition or implementation within your organization, it's really important that you understand all of these acronyms. You don't have to memorize them. There's always a place to reference these, but it's good to familiarize yourself. So when you see things like ACI, you know that's Advancing Care Initiative, which is essentially meaningful use. MIPS, which we talked about what that is. QPP, it's essentially learning how to speak the language of MACRA. So familiarize yourself with some of the acronyms. These are just a few. There are hundreds. So should you participate in an APM, which is an alternative payment model, advanced alternative payment model, or MIPS? And this particular table is very helpful in identifying which track is most applicable to you. So am I in an advanced APM? If you don't know, definitely find out, but if you're in one, you probably are aware of it. If the answer to that question is yes, do you have enough payments or patients through the advanced APM to qualify? If the answer is yes, you're excluded from MIPS reporting because your APM reports on your behalf. You may receive a 5% lump bonus payment for the first 5 years of QPP, and then a higher fee schedule in 2026. There are also many APM-specific rewards and incentives that you could qualify for as well. If the answer to your questions are no with regards to advanced APMs, MIPS is probably the track that you're going to be working under. If MIPS is your track, you want to ask the question, is this your first year in Medicare, or do you meet the low volume threshold? So the $90,000 in allowed Part B Medicare charges, or 200 or less Medicare Part B beneficiaries. If the answer is yes, you do not have to participate in MIPS. If the answer is no, you do have to participate in MIPS. So this is a really nice question and answer to walk you through which track is going to be most applicable to you and your organization. Bottom line, there will be financial incentives for APMs and MIPS tracks if you are reporting according to the guidelines. So 2016, 2017, 2018, you're seeing performance here for a meaningful use PQRS and value-based payment modifier. So as I said earlier, 2018, this year is the last year that you would see a financial impact from these previous quality programs. 2017 was our performance year, our first performance year for MIPS. 2017 impacts 2019. So as you can see, you're either getting a plus or minus 4% in 2019 based on the performance from 2017. Every year it goes up after that. So for 2018, you're subject to either plus or minus 5%. 2021, we're looking at plus or minus 7%. And 2022, we're looking at plus or minus 9%. And it will continue to go up from there. Over time, as we discussed, cost will become larger and your quality category will become smaller. So eventually, cost is going to absorb the majority of this composite score data. For 2017, cost was not even a factor. The nice thing about cost is that it's seamlessly reported. You don't have to do any extra work. Medicare receives this information through your claims data, so they understand what your costs are. 2017, we had 60% for quality, 15% for improvement activities, and 25% for advancing care initiatives. Now in 2018, which is our current performance year, we've got 50% for quality, 10% for cost, 25% for advancing care initiatives, and 15% for improvement activities. 2019, we're looking at a 30% cost category, which is pretty substantial, 30% for quality. So we're already seeing quality and cost on the same measure with regards to the weight for the composite score. 15% improvement activities, 25% advancing care initiatives. So these seem to be the same year after year, and then quality and costs are what are increasing. Our cost measure is increasing, our quality measure is decreasing. Quality is the performance category that replaces PQRS and covers the quality of care you deliver based on the performance measures that have been created by CMS, as well as stakeholders and medical professionals. For this year, you can pick up to 6 measures to report that best fit your practice. At the very end, we're going to talk about where to identify this information so that you have the resources to utilize this data, but the QPP website is very, very helpful in walking you through the quality measures that may be applicable to your specialty. They are categorized by specialty. Some have subspecialties. It's not all inclusive, but it's pretty good. Improvement activities. This performance category is an inventory of activities to assess how you are improving your care processes, enhancing patient engagement, and increasing your access to care. This is the activity that you will select measures with regards to enhancing care coordination, patient and clinician shared decision-making, and expansion of access to care. ACI, Advancing Care Information. This program replaces meaningful use. So this is essentially the new EHR incentive program. And this is essentially where you're picking measures based on how well you're utilizing your EHR. The EHR does need to be a certified EHR. And this is things like sharing test results or visit summaries with patients, therapeutic plans with patients and other facilities to better coordinate care. Much of ACI is going to be promoting interoperability and being able to share information through systems seamlessly. And then our cost category. So cost is replacing the value-based payment modifier incentive program. And the cost of the care you provide will be automatically calculated based on your claims data. So again, the nice thing about cost is that there's no reporting burden. It's done automatically for you. And MIPS uses this measure to gauge the total cost of care during the year or during a hospital stay. How much is it going to cost? That's really what they're evaluating. And 2018 is the first year that they're incorporating this into the MIPS final score. As we discussed earlier, this category will continue to expand. The reason why Medicare is focusing on costs is because they really want to evaluate the resources that clinicians use to care for patients. Are there less expensive resources? Are there better ways to do things? And then the Medicare payments under the physician fee schedule for care given to beneficiaries during an episode of care. So really looking at start to finish, what does this cost? And is this the most effective way to care for the patient and also the most cost-effective way? And an episode of care is the basis for finding items and services in a specified time frame. So episode of care is really isolating each point of care contact and understanding how much it costs. There are multiple options for reporting under the MIPS track. So you may report individually. As an individual, your payment adjustment will be based solely on your performance. So if you're in a group practice and you have a provider that would like to submit data individually, this is an option. The individual is defined as a single MPI tied to a single 10. So if you have a group 10, this would not be applicable. Keep in mind that the MIPS scores do follow providers. So they're actually tied to the provider's MPI, National Provider Identifier, and this follows providers from organization to organization. So if a provider, works for you and then they leave and they go somewhere else, this information will follow them. And conversely, if you're considering adding providers to your practice, you definitely want to do your research and make sure that there are no adjustments or wonky things that are tied to the provider's MPI that might negatively impact your organization. There's also the option to report as a group. So your payment adjustment would be based on the group's performance. A group is defined as clinicians identified by their MPI sharing a common tax identification number, no matter specialty or practice site. So if you're tied to a group 10, perhaps this is the best option for you with regards to reporting. A brand new option, also very exciting option for 2018, is the virtual group reporting option. So having the ability to share resources with other groups that are an established and approved virtual group. So this is a combination of 2 or more 10s made up of solo practitioners and groups of 10 or fewer eligible clinicians who perform together virtually, regardless of specialty or location. So essentially, lots of small practices have gotten together to utilize and share resources with regards to MIPS reporting. So the virtual group would report on your behalf. Definitely look into this if you're interested in sharing resources and learning from your peers about how they're doing this process. Great opportunity. Who can participate in a virtual group? So practitioners that are eligible for MIPS, a group with 10 or fewer clinicians, at least one eligible provider for MIPS. So it has to be eligible clinician, and it has to be a group of 10 or fewer clinicians. So who's not eligible to participate? You cannot participate if you're a solo practitioner, a group of 10 or fewer clinicians with no eligible clinicians. So if you have a group of fewer than 10, but nobody is an eligible clinician to report, you would not be allowed to participate in a virtual group. If you have more than 11 clinicians, even if you have eligible providers, because your group is too large, you would not fit the parameters to participate in a virtual group. There are no requirements or limits on the number of 10s that can be affiliated with a virtual group. So virtual groups have the flexibility to determine their own size. This can be, anywhere from 10 to hundreds of practices that are participating in a single virtual group. So questions that come up with regards to virtual groups. Virtual groups are able to decide who they can include regardless of specialty or location. And this is designed to make it easier for small practices to share resources. And then why should I participate in a virtual group? Again, the advantages are that you have strength in numbers, you have other resources to draw off of, and the virtual group can really take a lot of the administrative burden off of your organization if you choose that path. April 1st through June 30th, so that's quickly approaching, there is a window for you to register for your group to participate in the CMS web interface option. So essentially this interface would communicate with your EMR to pull out the data. The key is you have to register for this. So June 30th will be the last opportunity to do so. So that's MIPS in a nutshell. We're going to talk very briefly about APMs. APMs are much more complex as they are risk adjustment payment models, and there are many in all shapes and sizes. Essentially, APMs allow practices to earn more for taking on risk related to patient outcomes. So the financial incentives are higher, but the risk with regards to return is substantially higher than that of MIPS because you're taking on the risk for patient outcomes. Cost and quality for a population or condition, APMs, again, are really focused on risk and calculating how much each patient is going to cost for a particular year. APM organization compensates providers on MIPS type measures of cost and quality. So there are some overlaps, but again, APMs are really very different than MIPS with regards to the individual requirements of the APM. So there are APMs, lots and lots of APMs that already exist. ACOs, accountable care organizations. We've seen a lot of emergence with PCMH, patient-centered medical homes, and bundled payment models. These are existing. If these sound familiar to you, perhaps your organization participates in an APM. Advanced APMs are a track under alternative payment models, and then there's also MIPS APMs. So advanced APMs may earn a 5% incentive and then, again, get that higher fee schedule in 2026. If you're in an advanced APM, you are excluded from MIPS reporting requirements and payment adjustments. MIPS APMs are a specific type of APM that are not excluded from MIPS. So they have the requirements for their APM in addition to MIPS requirements. There is a separate scoring standard, and this can get very, very complicated with regards to all of the requirements. But if you're in a MIPS APM, you should have a good understanding of what that scoring standard actually entails. The advantages are reduced reporting burden. So the reporting is essentially done for you through the alternative payment model. There's no MIPS reporting requirements. Improvement activities automatically receive full credit. Advancing care information, report as a group or individually. So that's the option, again, if you're under a MIPS APM that does not exclude you from MIPS requirements. And then cost automatically calculated through your APM. APMs are excluded from MIPS, again, unless you're in that subset that's not excluded. 5% lump sum bonus, higher physician fee schedule in 2026. There's approximately 70,000 to 120,000 clinicians that will fall under APM and qualify for the 5% bonus payment. Some examples of APMs are CPC, Comprehensive Primary Care Plus, Medicare Shared Savings Programs, ACOs, Oncology Care Model, Comprehensive ESRD Care Model, Shared Savings Tracks. Again, these are existing. If you're a part of them, then you probably already know and understand the requirements for your APM. APMs require you to utilize a certified EHR, provides payments for covered professionals based on quality measures that are comparable to MIPS, and then you're either a medical home model expanded under the CMS Innovation Center or require participants to bear a more than nominal amount of financial risk. Again, we're taking on the risk for patient outcomes with an APM. How are advanced APMs defined? So are you a medical home, or again, are you part of that subset of participants that are taking on the risk for the patient outcomes. This is a lot of administrative burden, and physicians are already very much overwhelmed with administrative burden. Anytime, new initiatives or changes are brought up, there's usually a very negative tone, and I completely understand because we're all overwhelmed with it, and our physicians more than anybody. So some things not to do when implementing this program into your organization: you definitely want to steer away from valuing integration over results. Every provider is different, and perhaps you would want to explore reporting individually versus group, depending on the dynamics of your practice. Assuming physicians will retain training. The specific documentation requirements are going to depend on the measures that you select for your practice. Once those measures have been selected, the training has to be done with the physician so that they understand what the appropriate clinical documentation criteria is so that they can meet it regularly. This is like maintenance on a car. You have to do it regularly. You need to stay on top of it because physicians likely will not retain the training. So this is an ongoing thing, and as measures become more robust, the documentation requirements will also become more robust. Relying on back-end fixes, let's be proactive, not reactive. Not focusing on sustainability and standardization. Again, not a one-size-fits-all model. Not involving your physicians in the solution. This affects the physicians more than it affects anybody else, and that's why we have to make sure that they're at the table and have a say in all of this and how it really impacts them. The last and final thing that I would recommend staying away from is believing that your EMR will solve all of your problems. Your EMRs are great. They're great tools. They save us a lot of time in a lot of ways, but they are not the solution to all of our issues. And if somebody tells you that EMRs will solve all of your problems, they are probably not being honest. EMRs are, as I said, a great tool, but this particular program and incentive is going to require a lot of manpower and a lot of resources to ensure that you're not only reporting properly, your information is being received by CMS, and your documentation requirements are validated, and that, again, incorporates the physician. The goals of improved clinical documentation. Clinical documentation is of the utmost importance. It's essentially the legal representation of what transpired at each and every encounter with a patient. Many providers continue to remain unaware of how their documentation impacts various things, such as their coding and reimbursement, quality reporting, and their reputation as a provider. So as we look at expanding the cost category, there are now new designations of high-cost providers, and insurance plans are tiering providers based on their high-cost designation. So maybe they're listing preferred providers over high-cost providers, which again can impact your patient census. When documentation is not perfect, it is contrasting, it could be inconsistent, ambiguous, conflicting, or missing, lacking altogether. Clinical documentation is so very important in the quality payment program initiative. The data and the measures that we report are important, but the clinical documentation is really the most important piece of this. So make sure when you're undertaking this within your organization, clinical documentation improvement is part of that plan for implementation. There is a need for good clinical documentation, not a greater volume of documentation. So what can you do to be successful in UPP implementation process? The worst thing you can do is nothing. Here are some steps that you can take now to be successful and to ensure that you're on a path to success for future years. Start by downloading your QRUR reports, your Quality Resource Utilization Report. Pick which pathway is best suited for your practice. So if it's MIPS today, maybe it's APMs next year. Figure out what's going to be best for you and your organization. Evaluate EMR and other vendor readiness and costs. So find out if your EMR has the capability to report on your behalf. Are there additional costs associated with that reporting? Most large EMRs are going to have robust resources internally to help facilitate this transition. I would encourage you to contact your rep and find out if there's a designated person or team within your vendor that can help facilitate this transition. Decide if your practice will report at the individual or group level. The other option is to explore that virtual group option, and that may be very, very helpful to some of you that do not have the resources internally to manage this. Select a reporting or submission mechanism. So there are more than one way to submit your data. EMR is not the only way. So you can use a qualified clinical data registry, and these are approved registries by CMS that can report on your behalf. There are fees associated with QCDR, so definitely make sure you identify what those costs are. Electronic health records, so your claims data can be reported to suffice some of the requirements for MIPS. Verify your EHR reporting capability. That's super, super important. Other qualified registries, there are many options, claims data, and then the CMS web interface. Remember, the deadline for that is June 30th. So if you do not sign up for that before June 30th, unfortunately, that will not be a submission option. Review performance feedback for 2017. So the performance window, the submission window has closed. It closed March 31st. So you should be able to sign into the QPP website and get your data and feedback so that you can make improvements and adjustments for performance year 2018. Explore applicable measures and improvement activities. So utilizing your specialty measure set. You want to consider the clinical conditions that you treat, where your practice is located, your practice improvement goals, quality information that you can submit to payers. Looking at your current billing codes and your QRUR report will help you identify measures and activities that are most applicable to your practice. Verify the information you need to report successfully. Keep in mind each measure has their own elements and different reporting requirements. Make note of the elements and any applicable reporting periods so that you can get full credit for the measure. Here are some MACRA resources. So qpp.cms.gov is probably the best resource. It's a contracted resource for CMS. You can also call QPP directly. Their number is listed on this slide. PTN, so Practice Transforming Networks, is an organization that you can utilize if you have questions on improvement strategies. QIN or QIO, also contracted with CMS to help facilitate some of the health quality initiatives. And then small, underserved, and rural practices. There is a contracted vendor that is able to help small practices. Their contact is listed, their contact information is listed on this slide as well. So the resources are definitely there. Utilize them, and they should help as much as they can with regards to being successful in this transition. If you have any questions, please let us know, and I appreciate your time and attention, and I wish you the best of luck with reporting for quality payment programs. Thank you.